Passing my yarn back. So now basically I'm just going to try to ply these yarns together, try to get enough tension between both of them so that they're similar. There's not one side twisted more than the other or one side twisted around the other. Why does this keep happening? We have our applied yarn. I don't know what that was. So this is the yarn plied before it is hand spun. No, it is hand spun. Before it is wounded up into a hank. I'm going to need to figure out how to do that exactly. I think with a niddy noddy. I have one. The thing is, So I have my mini niddy noddy. Say that fast 3 times. Mini niddy, no, mini. Anyways, I think this is 1/2 meter. The reason why I got the mini one at the time was because I was spinning on my spindle, and I spun way less than this. So it's going to take quite a few wraps. We might need to make a few hanks, but it's okay. We'll do it, and then we'll see how many yards we have, and then we can potentially wash it, block it, knit up a swatch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go as much as I can, and then we're going to count the individual wraps just by counting how many strings there are in one of these 4 sections. And if each is 36 inches, each wrap, that should give us the amount of yardage. So that's how we're going to find that out. I sometimes get in the flow, and then sometimes it's like, where am I going? A little bit awkward. There we go. I'm getting back into it. I have 100 yards right here, and I still have this much left. I'm just gonna use some white cotton to make sure that it doesn't bleed out into my brand new hank. So let's do this. Are you ready to know the final count of exactly how many yards I spun up? Because I just finished. The bobbin is empty! Which means I can now try spinning a new yarn, but I ended up doing 3 ties to make sure it doesn't get tangled when I wash them. So I have three separate ties, but basically this is the smallest one, and this one is 76 yards. And then I have 2 100 yards. So basically I have 276 yards spun up. Now we're gonna wash, and then we're gonna figure out what type of yarn weight this would fit under. I wanna see it grow, I wanna see it bloom. As I said, I am worried I have a little bit, some parts might be a little bit overspun. So it does have a very interesting texture. It's more, I guess more papery than full wool, but it's not as much as like a linen or a tin. Like it feels nice, but it does have a little bit more of like it's not a fully sheep wool, so it's not itchy. But yeah, so I don't know if that fully makes sense what I just said there. I'm really happy with this. So I'm gonna go soak these in water, and we will see what happens once it dries. Sorry for the clickety clack. This is probably gonna make a lot of noise. I just wanted to show you guys how I dried my yarn. So this is what I did. This is my sock drying, my sock blocking hangers. And what I did is I hooked it onto the top, onto one of the socks, and then at the bottom I ended up hanging a second sock blocker so that it can kind of hang and still be weighed down by the bigger sock blockers down below. So let's just remove this. This is what the yarn looks like. It is really pretty. I don't know if that is because my spin was so inconsistent, but it is kind of like almost beaded, kind of pearly. You can clearly tell some parts, for example, this, where one strand really pulled against another one because this one is super thick, and I'm assuming the single that I plied it with was very thin. But I think that adds character, that adds charm, and this yarn is unique. You will never be able to find this yarn anywhere else because it is hand spun, and that's the beauty with hand spun yarn. So that's insane. Because we are now Monday. Actually, no, Monday I finished my first bobbin. So this took me 2 weeks because we are now Monday, and Monday last week I had finished my first bobbin. So in 2 weeks. So as I said, now I am going to cake this up, and we will knit up a swatch and maybe talk about some patterns that can be casted on with my very lovely hand spun yarn because I do want to use it. And I am just in awe of this color. I'm just in awe. But I really want to use it, and we're going to find something fun and where this can pop. So 14 to 18 is a baby sport weight, and then 12 to 15 is a DK weight. So I would say this on the chunkier parts is more DK, but then on the smaller sections, it's more sport weight. So it's kind of like an in-between on and off. And then I do have the random fingering section. So these guides that I got, I just ordered them and got them this weekend. So one thing that I'm going to do next time I spin is as I'm spinning, make sure that I stick within a specific wrap per inch to try to get more consistent spins. I didn't have that for this one, and I was kind of just like trying to get more the feeling of the machine and just how it works. what do you call these? We now have two beautiful little hanks, and I have my cake of yarn here, and I've already decided which pattern I wanted to knit with it. And at first I was thinking, you know what? We're going to do a swatch, measure, check our gauge, make sure everything is fine. But what's life without a little bit of risk? So instead, we are just going to hop right into the pattern and knit up the most beautiful shawl you've ever seen. And the pattern that I've decided to go with is actually one by Petite Knit. Shocker. But it's the Sophie shawl, Sophie Scarf. I'm doing the scarf because I have 276 yards. And for the shawl, you need much more. The shawl is a lot bigger than the scarf. And the shawl calls for a worsted weight and the scarf is DK weight. And what is going on outside? Because it's not completely balanced and even. I think that the best stitch to knit up with this would actually be a garter stitch. And I was looking over on Ravelry in the garter stitch pattern section, and I found the Sophie Scarf or Sophie shawl. Because garter stitch, it's like a textured stitch, and I feel like if you knit it with uneven yarn, it's a little bit more forgiving than just a stockinette or a very textured stitch. So the scarf only calls for 122 yards, but I'm actually gonna make it as long as I can with the yarn I have. So what Petite Knit recommends is if you have less yarn or more yarn and you want to make the shawl or scarf bigger, what you can do is weigh the yarn you have. So I weighed it, I have 117 grams of yarn, and then I'm going to divide it by 2 so that when I get to 58 grams, it's 58 divided by 2. So when I get to 58 grams of knitted up fabric, I will then start working the decreases to finish this shawl. So that is what we're going to do, and then whatever length it ends up being, that's what it'll end up being. So I just got back from my lunch, but before I continue on with my day and just forget about this, I just realized I wanted to show you guys. So this is how much yarn we have left on the first skein. And this is how much was knit up last night. I feel like this is a lot. I feel like the scarf is going by really, really quickly. And so far it's been really fun to knit up. It's a very simple knit and repeat, but a lot of fun. The only thing is you really need to keep track of your rows so that the increases work evenly. And I'm actually really glad that I'm using this app, because the only issue is sometimes I will turn off my phone and forget to hit the giant plus, but it's been helping me a lot just to remember that every so rows, like you just like add in a row or minus. It's been really helpful with keeping track of when to do an increase and when not. Like, oh, like so and so rows ago I did an increase. It's hard to see with the garter stitch. And I'm honestly surprised with how unified the yarn looks. It is as expected. Some sections are thicker, some sections are thinner. Some have more twists, some have less twists. And you can clearly tell that this was made from handspun yarn, and it is clearly homemade, but I guess that adds charm to it. So it's now a different day, and I really wanted to show you guys the shawl and what it looks like, but it's still a little bit wet and I'm still blocking it. So it's probably gonna go back on the mat right after. But this is the scarf, and I feel like it actually really grew a lot. I should have taken the measurements before blocking it and measured it now. I always forget to do that with my patterns because I'm so excited to just shove it in water now and get it like to the final size. Yeah, so it's still humid, but this is what it looks like. It's definitely a lot bigger than the petite knit version. I think hers was, so this is the original scarf, and then this is mine. I think it's like more than double in size, yet I basically only used double the yarn that was required. So I think it just grew in length a lot. So I'm gonna call these tassels. My tassels are clearly a lot longer than hers. However, I absolutely love this, and I love the way that the yarn worked up. I'm really impressed that I was able to spin up 176 grams in 2 weeks, and then in about 2 days and a half, I turned that yarn into a lovely little scarf. If you guys haven't knit the Sophie shawl or the Sophie scarf, I highly recommend you do, because this pattern was very simple, but still kept my very captivating and kept my attention. I think it's because of the fact that there's so many increases on one side and so many decreases. It's mindless knitting, but you need to pay attention. And if you do get a row counter app or a little like trinket to count your rows, because even with that, I still got confused sometimes and wasn't sure if I needed to do an increase or not, or a decrease or not. But honestly, I feel like as a knitter, we kind of overlook garter stitch a lot and just skip garter stitch because it tends to be one of the stitches we learn at the beginning of like when you first discover knitting and start knitting. But it's such a lovely, fun stitch. But it's such a lovely, fun stitch to work up, and I think it's really, really worth it in the end. My spin not being perfect has shown up a little bit in the shawl, in the scarf. I'm not too sure if you can tell. Right here, there's a clean division and line where this was the first one and this was the newer skein. And I think it's because my first skein was the beginning of my spin, which was more inconsistent. So it was thicker. It ended up being thicker when I plied it. And then this partly was more of my end spin, which was thinner of a spin because I had a little bit better of a grip on the yarn. The section in which you can tell the most, though, how inconsistent my spin was, is actually the beginning and the end of the shawl. So this is the beginning where I first started off, and I think that this was where the bobbin started, and you can clearly tell, I think this is even more thick of a yarn than DK, this section here. I don't know if it's worsted exactly, but it's just like a lot. It's the thickest part. And then this is towards the end of my spin. I think I got a little, I don't know what happened here, but this section of the yarn was very, very thin. And I'm assuming both plies together were very, very thin. So it kind of resulted in this difference. So one is very, very thick. One is very, very thin. I would consider this here even to be a fingering weight. And then this here, I don't know, maybe DK, but a little bit thicker than DK. I don't know if it's worsted. And I think that that's the beauty from spinning your own fiber and knitting your very own like yarn into something. It becomes very unique, and all these little kinks and quirks really make it beautiful. I have started a new spin because spinning is addicting. And I just wanted to show you guys because I finished my first bobbin, and this is what it looks like. I am not filming this one. This is kind of just for me to get more practice, and it is so much more consistent. I do believe it's because the fiber I'm actually using, it's a Lily and Pine roving. It's BFL and Tucson silk. I think it was 20% Tucson silk, and then the rest is BFL wool. And what I decided to do with this one is something called fractal spinning. And fractal spinning is when you take a color braid with like lots of color changes and you split it down the center so you have one section in one. And then on one bobbin, which is this one, you spin the whole section. So this is the normal changing rate of the braid, the normal changing colors of the braid. And then the second section, you then split it into 4, and then you will spin those ones back to back to back so that you have one bobbin where the yarn will change consistently, like at a certain slow pace, and then the second bobbin, the colors will be much more quick. And when you ply them together, it should give a yarn kind of like this. So my hope is to do that. I decided to go with a fractal spin because basically the color is worked before you spin, so then you can just focus on your spin, your tension, and keeping a consistent twist. I think maybe in my next Knits and Babbles, or maybe in a later episode, I'll show you guys the final look of this yarn. And maybe if you guys are really interested, I have a lot more roving and braids, so I can totally show you guys how to do fractal spin or a different type of spin. If you guys have any tips or tricks or technique, we can kind of do another braid from roving to a finished yarn. Putting this back on, I'm truly amazed with this yarn and what it ended up looking like. At first, I really wasn't sure about the color, but the more I worked on it, the more like having it as a finished product, I actually love it. I thought that this would wash me out a lot more and make me look really, really sick because it's so light and minty of a color, but I think it works out really, really well. When it was time to ply, I did get a little bit scared that this wasn't going to work out, but I think in the end, this was a triumph, and I love my new scarf. So I think right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back on the blocking mat and maybe later go get some pictures of my brand new scarf. And I think, yeah, we're just going to say goodbye. Have a lovely, beautiful day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.